You've been 5 games unbeaten. You think you've turned a corner. Naturally, as a fan, especially, our fan base that has seen so much, it's a tough one.
So, Ruben Amorim's unbeaten run ended at 5, following the most abject of evenings against Everton. Still, his Manchester United side remains only 3 points outside of the Champions League places, ahead of a weekend trip to the capital. We are touching on every bit of it, as well as Elliot Anderson, Joao Gomes, Carlos Baleba, and much more. It's all coming up on the latest episode of your Theatre of Red. Ladies and gents, I hope you're doing well, and thank you for giving me your time once more today. I'd just like to start by saying a quick thank you for the many messages and emails with your kind words following my personal family tragedy. Naturally, it's a pretty difficult situation to try and handle, and I felt my time was best spent on paper afterwards rather than moping my way through a podcast. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all. I assure you that each and every message helped me. On this day of returns, who better to sit and have a little chat with than my good friend, the man behind the wonderful United Arts, Mr. Reza Pedramnia. How is everything in your world, sir?
I'm good, thank you. All the better now that I'm hearing your fine, smooth radio voice back.
There we go. Those dulcet sounds of Mr. Connolly, as I hear all the time. Reza, as has always been the case, I do like to wait just a little bit before diving into a spoken post-match discussion, because as you know, the sensationalist views and these over-the-top conversations that happen are fair. In this case, as we know, plenty of people, they woke up from a 5-week slumber to start shouting and screaming about how they were correct all along, with almost immediate calls for Ruben Amorim to be sacked, as I saw in certain places. In that, I'm going to say this, I'm not pardoning what was a shambolic evening against Everton. It was a truly rubbish performance, all things considered. The agony of failing to put away a side with 10 men when you have close to 90 minutes of football in the comfort of your own home. It's a tough one to swallow, because I think it was a turgid spectacle, even before Idrissa Gueye saw red for that utterly bizarre moment with Michael Keane. Even when reduced to 10, the bizarre thing was that it was United that looked the more shell-shocked of the two sides, which I couldn't quite wrap my head around. There was an abundance of incorrect decisions made on and off the field. Amorim, it is fair to say here now, and we have to say this, was plenty culpable for certain selections and in-game changes, while the players themselves should be utterly embarrassed at their failure to string a handful of passes together from the opening whistle, it must be said, or to find what should have been a professional standard when reacting to that numerical advantage that they had. Rather than me sit here and speak unbroken for a half hour on this particular topic, I would love to know, how did you feel, let's say, during the game and after the final whistle on Monday?
Well, just like yourself and pretty much the rest of the fan base, it was very frustrating to watch. I mean, you're kind of going into the game with, higher hopes and a little bit more expectation. You've been 5 games unbeaten. You think you've turned a corner. So naturally, as a fan, especially, our fan base that has seen so much negativity, and so many bad results over the past couple of years, you're thinking, yeah, we're gonna do this. And then you see Everton going down to 10 men in that manner, and you're thinking, it's going to be a great day. We actually gonna, get this, and we're gonna carry on the unbeaten run, and, we're gonna take another step forward. And then that happens. So, I mean, it's a tough one because, on the surface, you're looking at, the 5 games unbeaten run and everything. But at the end of the day, this is still a team very much in transition. And this isn't a regular rebuild that's going on at Manchester United. You got to think there's been, 12 years of underachievement. And we've had so many different managers, all with different systems, and that gets into the players' minds. It's not something that can easily be changed within one season. And I know Amorim came in and he's been here like a year now. But the previous season, he was literally thrown into the deep end, and having all that, the 13 years of underachievement and the players' mentalities and the broken culture at the club, it's impossible to change. And like he said himself, one of his biggest worries is his team or the players taking too much notice of the noise. He said that like a few weeks ago, and results did improve, but I think elements of that are perhaps still in their minds. The game, I mean, it didn't seem like we're actually that bad, but to me it just felt like we are rushing everything, every decision, in terms of passes in front of goal. To me, I just kept thinking, if they just take a moment to calm down a little bit, it's going to help in the decision making, and that's going to go a long way in terms of getting a half decent results in front of 10 men. But it is what it is. We still got a bit of a way to go, and there was a few pieces missing as well. Obviously, Maguire wasn't there, and even though we had plenty to cover for him, the goal scoring issue is still there as well. Sesko, fine, he was missing, but he's pretty much our main striker right now. And we've had this chat before about whether he was the right signing or not. And I don't want this to be interpreted as me kind of piling on poor old Sesko, because he is still very young. There is a long way to go with him as well. My only thing is that perhaps in the situation that we're in right now, a more experienced striker would have, fitted us better, instead of bringing in pretty much someone like exactly the same as Rasmus Højlund, without the PL experience, without having experienced the pressure of being at Manchester United, and then expecting them to provide, more goals for the team. But anyway, he wasn't playing. So, even if he was, I'm not sure how much of a difference that would have made. So it comes back to the squad depth. So who we're going to play instead of him? Sirski, obviously the first choice. And how many games has he played this season? How many games has he started? And, at this level, you need to have that match sharpness. So, when you start thinking about it, you're like, okay, it's not as black and white as most people would think. There are still issues there. I wouldn't say we are, I was watching it and I was, in despair. It was more of a case of a frustration for me.
They just didn't look like they were at the races to me. And this isn't deliberately trying to go in and go against what you're saying. It just looked like there was a nervousness within the side. Inevitably, though, the conversation obviously immediately shifted to formation and Amorim's inability to deviate from his set structure despite having a numerical advantage. Now, it goes without saying, Reza, we heard next to nothing about this particular conversation during the 5-game unbeaten run. It's almost to be expected to surface if and when the team hits a wall, as they did. Now, what I do want to speak about this, I do also think it's important to address something that I frequently write about. It's a topic that I know you have plenty of opinion about yourself, and that is the necessity for people with public power to consistently shift the goalposts for the football club. It falls into the dynamic of what you were referencing about the players buying into what's being said and the noise outside of the club. I usually title this stuff something in the region of expectations and reality, and then dive into the inevitable damage that false expectations undoubtedly have on a very impressionable fan base, particularly on Twitter. Now, a prime example of all of this is Gary Neville, and it was him referencing the team and their progress this season somewhere in around 6 weeks ago, I think. Maybe you can prove me wrong there, but at the time, he stated that the club should be targeting 8th or 9th this season based on what we're seeing. And even fast forward a couple of weeks, the team picks up a handful of wins, and he's publicly speaking about how the target needs to be top 4. So in a matter of 3 weeks, you've gone from saying that the club should be looking at 8th or 9th to saying that the club should be targeting a return to Champions League football. Now, I know that the Premier League is very congested at this moment, and despite losing to Everton, United do remain only 3 points outside the Champions League places. At the same time, this is a squad, albeit with 4 additions, that finished 15th last season. And they didn't finish there by some fluke or misfortune, Reza. It's not a one-off cup final like we saw against Spurs. But the necessity for these people to continuously judge Manchester United on the success under Sir Matt Busby and Sir Alex Ferguson, it's nothing but damaging to this current crop. And it sets the tone then for the unconditional backlash as soon as something goes wrong. And then all the while, people are led to believe that progress is not always linear for every other side except Manchester United. And sometimes I feel like I'm alone when I'm discussing these things or writing about them, because so many of today's prominent social media voices are either juveniles or they're people who just thrive on notoriety. They're just simply incapable or unwilling of appreciating the inevitability of setbacks when you try to construct something. Now, on top of this, you obviously have the added burden of it being one rule for Amorim and another for everybody else, including Arne Slot, when it comes to media exposure. So from your perspective, just how damaging is all of this on top of the natural pressure that this squad of players, including a very young Benjamin Sesko, has playing for Manchester United?
It is incredibly damaging, Shaun. You've written about it at length. You've discussed it at length. I've pretty much written, a number of articles specifically about our own legends, the likes of Gary Neville, Roy Keane, and Paul Scholes, who seem to be very, very vocal on these things. And obviously, the fan base, takes the word as gospel. One issue that we have, especially with Twitter, that a lot of people, they just refuse to see past the tip of their own nose. I'm sorry if that might upset some people, but that's the reality.
It's the truth.
Yeah, they literally hear the soundbite, from Gary Neville, from Roy Keane, the legendary Roy Keane, and that is it. It means automatically you have to agree with, what these guys say. And, I've said this before, it seems like these guys have forgotten what it was like, specifically the younger guys who came through the academy, like Neville and Scholes. They've forgotten what it was like to come through the academy and be under scrutiny. Now, the scrutiny that Gary Neville talks about, it was basically, written in papers. It wouldn't follow you. If Gary Neville did something wrong, it wouldn't follow you for like weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. It wouldn't haunt you when you went home and switched on the TV, or, back then there was no, mobile phones. So you wouldn't be hounded by it. It wouldn't be constantly in your mind. Now it's like one little thing, and then 2 weeks later, people are still bringing it up and retweeting it and digging up the old videos and sharing it. And you just can't compare like their days to how it is now in terms of like pressure from the media. And I'm pretty sure they're not doing it on purpose. They do tend to forget about it, and they're completely unaware of how much it can hurt the players. Their mentality is like, well, we would have got through it, but they forget the amount of support that they had, in terms of institutional support. You had obviously Sir Alex Ferguson, who was completely in charge of what went on at the club in terms of the media. One bad word, and that's it. They were out. He would freeze them out. He would have that, protective wall built around these guys, so they would concentrate on nothing but football. The things that he did for Ryan Giggs and Lee Sharp, and, fine, sometimes you would get players who have like a bad attitude, but because of that protective wall, he would be able to kind of help them rehabilitate a lot better. And still kind of stay within the United culture and move forward with the team. But now, that player goes off, especially the youngsters, goes home, switches on, their Twitter account or Instagram account, and what they see and what they hear constantly, like following him in terms of negativity, it's not a good thing at all.
No, it is not. And there should be whole sections of the football club attributed to being able to deal with this sort of thing, because whether or not we like it, and the older we get, we understand less and less about what's occurring. It's a part of these footballers' daily lives.
I was going to say, it's like a double-edged sword, because in these kind of situations, before, we would be looking at these things from a position of strength, because you had the longevity of the manager, he had the authority, the club was winning, everything. But now the whole focus is it is on the manager to perform straight away. Literally any manager that's come in since Sir Alex, within the first few weeks, they're worried about their job. You had guys like Moyes, obviously, who was under Fergie's shadow basically, and he made a lot of mistakes early doors. But pretty much everybody from I'd say Van Gaal onwards, they've always been looking over their shoulder since day one. And you don't get to have that authority on the team when something like this goes on. You're purely focused on getting results straight away. So if you have like a youngster who's been affected by social media, or they're having attitude problems, you don't spend that much time trying to rehabilitate them, because it's not your priority. It's a terrible thing, but it's the truth. Garnacho was a perfect example. We got a kid who's we had a kid who was like super talented, huge attitude problems. And obviously the people around him didn't help him either. You think about that and you think, okay, what would Sir Alex would have done with this guy? He would have spent a lot more time with him than, let's say, Erik ten Hag did or Amorim did, because he had the luxury of time. He had that authority. He could spend time, a little bit more time, and try to get him sorted out. But guys like Ten Hag and Amorim, they don't have that time. They can't worry about a kid who's got an attitude problem on day-to-day basis. They have to fill their players. We're going to get them results. So you just end up being stuck in this vicious cycle, and it's not going to change until there is some stability at the club, until the manager feels more stable and the club are making him feel that he's going to be given a fair chance, and he's going to get a bit of time to kind of build the team in his own image and get them firing the way that he wants them to. Only then we're going to see these kind of changes and improvements.
We saw one of the prime examples during this particular period that you're referencing in Jimmy Garner against Everton. He didn't have the opportunity to come in because no manager had the opportunity to be able to put him into a starting 11 or give him enough regular playing time to allow him to develop to the manner that we knew he could because of what we saw at an academy level. Before diving into that, I obviously mentioned the topic of formations, and I don't want to get away from that because there's so much focus on an inability for Amorim to alter his mindset and facilitate a more attack-minded system, particularly when it comes to playing 10-man at Everton. I will say, and it's not trying to be controversial, but personally, I do find this conversation a little dull, Reza. And I'm going to tell you why now, and I'm going to tell everyone who's listening why. And you can tell me if you disagree with me at the end. But when you factor in the fall-off between the guaranteed starters to those in reserve, and then the absence of two key attackers, as we've spoken about with Sesko and Matthias Cunha particularly, and then the positioning of players like Matthias de Ligt or Lenny Yoro during that fixture, I can't help but feel that it's just another stick to poke the manager with. You look afterwards, and as Amorim said himself, and he's done so many times as well in fairness, something may start as a 3-4-3 or a 5-3-2. Inevitably, it morphs mid-game. But so many people get fixated on the principles of the system because of the personnel that are actually on the field. Now, I say that because anybody with the slightest interest in this stuff like I do, you can do a 2-second Google search to determine the actual positioning of any player during any game. And you're then led to believe that because Yoro, de Ligt and Shaw are on the field, that the team is playing defensively. You've got defenders sitting back with nothing to do. And therefore, you're not taking advantage of the numbers that Everton have. When in reality, if you actually looked at it, de Ligt spent the majority of his time on the halfway line or just behind it. Yoro spent more time in the attacking 10 than he did in defence. And Shaw, for however bad he played, spent nearly 80% of his time in the left-sided 10 area. I look at it all and I look at the game and the formation and the setup. Admittedly, I would have liked to see Mason Mount introduced sooner than half-time. And truthfully, I think I probably would have played him instead of Xerxes. And I'm not saying that in hindsight, because it's something that I had actually published before the game even started. And I think Xerxes' showing probably emphasised why we haven't seen him, because he was largely underwhelming. As was Kobbie Mainoo, to be fair, for the near 40-minute cameo that he supplied. But then you look outside of those two, and you're left with Shea Lacey, who is talented as he is at the underage level, because I've been covering him for years. Regardless of what Samuel Lockhart says, he is worth the hype. I mean, he wasn't deemed the saving grace to our attacking issues on that day. And you look at Manuel Ugarte, Lisandro Martinez, Aidan Heaven, Tyrell Malacia, none of those are guaranteeing attacking results. So a lot of this comes down to squad depth, as you have mentioned. You've alluded to it already. Now, rest assured, anyone listening who feels that this is an out-and-out defensive Amorim, I assure you it's not. What I'm trying to do is stamp out this appreciation of the situation, the players available, the ball playing and the distribution improvements of De Ligt and Euro throughout the season, and also the understanding that a formation is often primarily what it is for the basis of pre-match analysis. Because unless you're not actually watching the game, players move around the pitch regularly. I think what this stems down to, and my fundamental point that I'm trying to make, is the larger issue for me. It stems from the same branch as what we witnessed against Grimsby, and that is what appears to be a complete lack of professional understanding from these players about how to deal with particular situations. I don't care if you swapped Amorim for a managerial duo of you and me, Reza. Any 11 players from that squad should have gone out and beaten Grimsby without any direction from the touchline. And similarly, I think the 11 players that were selected against Everton should be more than comfortable dealing with a numerical advantage against a side that are sitting deep. And although now you would expect training scenarios to cover this, the majority of these players are international footballers and they're being paid to play at the highest level. So with such, I feel that an inability for that group to know how to play a professional game against 10 men at Old Trafford is far more worrying than the formation on paper. And that is a player issue. That's not a managerial issue in my books. But by all means, you can tell me how wrong I am if you feel that to be the case, sir.
You're absolutely right. I've honestly talked about this before as well, and you're pretty much echoing my own thoughts as well. I've never been into, formations and systems and all this. I'm an old-fashioned, football guy. I want to go sit down, watch the game, enjoy the atmosphere, and talk about anything but the formation afterwards. I want to talk about how great the goal was or how great the pass was, that resulted in it. To me, formations, look, the bottom line is formations and systems, these are just a set of instructions given to the players. That is it. That's literally it. And we are talking about, as you said, Premier League players. Okay. Now, I refuse to believe that this system that Amorim has deployed, it's some crazy thing that he thought up, in a lab, and he's just brought it to the Premier League, and it's just not suiting our style of football and this and that. Like you said, these are international players. These are Premier League players. Now, I've mentioned this before. Now let's flip it around to the time he was in Portugal, right? So the system worked there. Okay, fine. People are saying he's rigid. He doesn't want to change. Fine. So he's pretty much doing exactly what he's doing now. Or he did exactly what he's doing right now at United, at Sporting. Now, people have always looked down at, pretty much every league apart from the Premier League and Portuguese league. A lot of people consider it to be weak and the caliber of players there not to be as good as the Premier League players. Fine. So Amorim goes there, and within one summer, he pretty much signs a whole new team. Not all of them are, actually none of them were kind of like, world-class players. A lot of them were from the academy, a lot of them from the Portuguese league. And he put this team together within one summer. And from then on, they went on this amazing run. What is it there? They went on a crazy unbeaten run and on a trophy haul as well. This was all with the same system in which they learned in such a short space of time. Now, without being disrespectful to any Portuguese players out there, but it comes down to footballing IQ and footballing intelligence. So if by default a lot of people consider the Portuguese league to be inferior to the Premier League, you're also implying that the players there are, in terms of football intelligence, they are less intelligent. So how can less intelligent players who are being given the same set of instructions within one summer, a team pretty much comprising of academy players and, Portuguese players, gets it and they just run with it and they go on an unbeaten run and they win trophy after trophy. But then Premier League players at a club like Manchester United, who are supposed to be, many levels above those guys, cannot understand these instructions, and we get guys like, Gary Neville or Carragher and a whole load of other pundits coming on and, talking about, but it's the system. It just is so confusing. How can this set of instructions be as confusing to Premier League players? It's completely baffling. I don't buy that narrative at all. It is to do with the players. I've talked about the psychological side of things a lot on Twitter, and this is a mental issue. Now, things are seemingly changing a little bit. Players are looking a little bit more, resilient, and there is a little bit of a mental fortitude forming there. So I'm hoping that we'll get over this little blip and get back on track. But ultimately, it is down to the players. The manager is giving him a set of instructions, and they're not following it. As Premier League players, you got 10 men at home, at Old Trafford. The whole stadium's behind you. How can you not find a way of beating him?
With Christmas around the corner, each and every one of us is going to experience that annual pain of trying to buy for that one person who has it all. Well, what if I told you that I can help you out a little? The brains behind Has, Does, Whatever are creating one-of-a-kind Manchester United gear. Everything from t-shirts to sweatshirts, hoodies and Christmas jumpers made by hand in Manchester by a bona fide Red. What began as drawing United players on an iPad has transformed into something absolutely marvellous. You can get 20% off your first order by simply visiting the website and signing up. Or you can avail of a splendid buy two, get one free offer that is running today. There has never been a better time to grab some unique Manchester United gear for you or that special someone. So visit hasdoeswhatever.com today to explore a huge range. I'll drop all the information in the show's bio, and you, listener, you can thank me later. I feel it's necessary to include at least one from the many questions that have been submitted through to me at editor@theatre-of-red.com. It comes from a long-time listener, not from an individual that has been sending me questions. More so, it's like a pen pal per se. It's someone I've been corresponding with for quite some time. The listener's name is Charlotte. She wants to ask about our opinion on midfield. You've recently spoken about the club's pursuit of a midfield target or targets, naming Elliot Anderson and Joao Gomes as two alongside Carlos Baleba. As of today, who would you put your money on and who would be your preference? I think it is relevant to speak about this, Reza, because obviously this is one of the hottest topics going at the moment. As I stated last week, I feel that it is not a case of if the club makes an approach for Anderson. Instead, when they will choose to make an approach for him. As I've written about, he's now the priority target, and I've said that for several weeks, because officials are said to be huge admirers alongside Amorim and Jason Wilcox, particularly with how he has grown this season. And the point that was made to me several occasions was how he has seamlessly transitioned onto the international stage. It looks like it's water off a duck's back. Now, it goes without saying, through everything you will look at when you go back through his career, his 4-year journey from League Two to the Premier League is genuinely remarkable. And the thing that has stood out to me the most, he's just done it with composure and with grace. He looks completely unfazed. As you know yourself, we've seen plenty of generations of Manchester United now, not giving away our age. But you need that for a Manchester United team, particularly one at this stage of a rebuild. Like, from a playing perspective, I just think that he has it all and more. And I reckon that his signing could be the poster acquisition for this team. I do genuinely think he is that good. But naturally, other clubs are interested in him as well. So it's not going to be plain sailing. If it was at any stage deemed impossible, the club has rightfully sought out alternative names. And although it's not a like-for-like replacement, Joao Gomes is a player who has ticked many of the boxes at Old Trafford. This is something I wrote about several weeks ago as well. Now, the biggest difference here is that he doesn't offer the same type of transformative abilities in going forward as Anderson does. He's more of how you would call a modern day destroyer. He's a damn good one too, may I say. So if you bring a player like that, you're focusing more on who can go alongside him to complement him. Whereas with Anderson, I think that he is good enough to complement a variety of others. So when I peel it all back, I think the need is so much that the club would like both of these players. And that's what I'm being told. It's not saying that one or both of them could be achieved in January, but there is a desire to get the ball rolling. And as well as that, Baleba is still admired. But his standing has dropped, I'm told, because of a number of subpar performances this season versus the inevitable price tag to lure him. And that has been deemed a cause for concern. So from the initial question, you ask who my preference is. So I don't think it's going to surprise you based on what I've said to hear me say Anderson. And this has been the case for many months. I am about as all in on a player with him as I can possibly be. And I do truly hope that a deal can be achieved. But saying that, I'd also love Gomes on top of that, if I can be greedy. Right there, you then have a powerhouse of Premier League experience brought into the engine room of this rebuild. I am curious, though, because this is just my take. What do you think about it, Rez? Where do you stand in the midfield search at this stage of the season? Because I know you wrote really, really in-depth about Carlos Baleba several months ago. How do you feel now?
I still like him, but in terms of mentality, and I talk about mentality and psychology a lot.
And I love it.
Thank you. Honestly, I don't think he's at this particular moment. I'm not sure about him anymore, purely because how he's played since his links with us. Now, I fully understand and appreciate how young he is, and how being suddenly linked with a club like Manchester United can impact you. But at the same time, we have had plenty of other players who've come from other clubs, and the mentality has just been completely different. Or players who we have been linked with, we didn't get them for a number of reasons, but find that they might their heads might drop for like a few weeks or so, but then they pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and they go for it again, try to prove you wrong. And that is the kind of mentality and character that we need. And again, that I fully appreciate how young he is, but to me right now, the type of the profile of the player that we needs to have a very, very strong character to put up with partially with a lot of the nonsense and a lot of the pressure that just comes with playing for a club like Manchester United. So in that respect, look, I still be happy if we sign Baleba. He wouldn't be my number one choice. I would definitely go for Anderson. There is really nothing more that I can add, in terms of how good his abilities are. He will be transformative, definitely, for us. I love his mentality. We've seen, week after week how, he's doing for Forest. And it kind of honestly annoys me a little bit, because when did Forest sign him? It was summer 2024, right?
Yeah, they got him last summer, yeah.
And what were we busy doing at that time? We were busy chasing Dan Ashworth from Newcastle.
Yeah, I know.
A good 6 months before that. And then Forest went and they spent that time getting,
30 million
out of that club for 35 million. Yeah. And, I like to hope that we're now in a position with the personnel that we have that we are not going to miss out on these type of players any longer, especially when they're right on your doorstep.
I cannot stress this enough. I generally don't get overly excited about football players coming to the club. Like, obviously, I'm very happy when we get players through. It's just I've learned over the years not to be overly hopeful, because I've been stung on many, many occasions. Like this summer, it was quite great when you're bringing in the players that we brought in, because the likes of Cunha and Bumo, Lamens, brilliant players, Sesko, fantastic capabilities and a ceiling for growth. But I just look at Elliot Anderson and the way that he plays football in the Premier League. It seems like he was born to do it. And the fact that he was playing League Two football 4 years ago, it looks like he was made to play for Manchester United. I wish there was some way I could go and sit down in front of him and plead my case with him, because he is just that good. And I really, really hope the club do everything in their power to get it over the line. In saying that, we know as well, like, the club could do everything, but another club could do the very, very same things. So hopefully the allure of being the man to come back into Manchester United, it's like something similar I said about Victor Gyökeres months before he signed that even though United are not what they once were, surely a striker would like to come into the football club and be the man that spearheaded the revolution that brought United back to the head of the table. Well, surely Anderson would like to be the man who would come in and boss that midfield and be the name that we spoke about for the next decade. On my hopeful little rant here, that'll bring us along nicely, Reza, to the weekend trip to London to face a Crystal Palace side who are just very good at football. I think it's as simple as that. They're very, very good at football. They're currently occupying 5th place. They've got the second best goals conceded behind Arsenal. I think they've got 9 conceded, an abundance of wonderful footballers, such as the excellent Adam Wharton, who I didn't mention when we were speaking about midfielders a moment ago. And they're all playing out of their skin, which is the most important thing for Oliver Glasner. They're unbeaten at home domestically this season. But we were unbeaten in Forward Old Trafford before the arrival of Everton, so records are there to be broken, my man. We haven't managed to win against them in the previous 4. We lost 3. But the only plus point is that we gained that point in London last season. I look at this and I say that a positive result, it can transform the mood ahead of a favourable couple of fixtures against West Ham and Wolves. A loss after the disappointment against Everton could really set us back into a toxic environment. And that is the last thing that Amorim will want at this stage of the season. How are you feeling about the weekend, considering that we'll likely be able to call in the service of Matheus Cunha once more?
It will be a tough game, and definitely all the toxicity from this week, it will be on the back of their minds. But, like I said, I like to think we have at least mentally turned a bit of a corner here. We did have a huge inferiority complex, and, we don't have that now, in terms of playing teams like Liverpool. After beating Liverpool, I think that was a huge, huge thing for us. There is definitely a mental fortitude there. These are the foundations that, you kind of build on. We are a lot more resilient. So I like to think we're going to dust ourselves off and, give it a good go. We're not guaranteed to win it because, again, it's still the same team that finished 15th last season, and there's still a lot of work. But what I want to see, honestly, I just want to see a bit of progress. I want to see a good fight. I want to see better, decision making. And if we come away with a point from there, I'll actually be happy with it, and then we can kick on. For me, right now, the way we are, like it's baby steps. I don't want to get my hopes up, every single game. For me right now, I'm thinking like this team still needs a lot of players. Midfield is a massive issue. Goal scoring, striker, it's still a bit of an issue. So, at the same time, we are not actually that far off. We're only a few points off the Champions League spots. I think like 5 points off second place. So if we're keeping like thereabouts, by the January window, obviously you want to see a bit of progress. I'm not just saying sit and hope that everybody else around us keeps dropping points, but obviously you want to see a bit of progress as well. But if we're keeping thereabouts by January, and then we get someone like we get Anderson, you never know in January, or Gomes or Baleba, you just don't know. And all these players can be transformative. And add like someone like Semenyo as well, who's recently come into the picture. If any of these players push to go to Manchester United in January, I think we are going to do our utmost to do that. And, we've seen how the club operates now. They want the yes from the player first. We saw it with Cunha. He wanted Manchester United, nobody else. We want to sign him. And Bumo, bam, done. Gyökeres, he was messing around too much. He obviously wasn't keen enough to join. We didn't pursue it. We didn't waste half the summer, and we went for the player who did give the yes to us ahead of Newcastle and came and joined us. And I think any of these players, especially Anderson, now that there is a lot of buzz about him, and I think Andy Mitten mentioned something today about him as well, that he is the number one target. I don't think we would be pursuing him if we had any kind of like a negative thing in terms of him preferring perhaps other clubs. So I think if we get to January window and we manage to sign one of these players, then I think it's going to be different second half of the season. So for me, I would take a draw, even if we lose. Honestly, obviously I don't want us to lose, but it's not going to be the end of the world because we know how much work needs to be done.
Well, we've seen it time and time again with this football club throughout the last decade. You're requiring a response from a position of frustration. But you know that, despite what every Tom, Dick and Harry would have you believe, I do think that there is enough in this group to banish that Monday night fixture immediately and set about on a positive run again. Now, Ruben himself has rubbished the suggestion that certain fixtures favour others because any team can win on any given day in the Premier League. And given the congestion that we see, it's more than a fair statement to go along with. But this will prove an interesting fixture for those pre-match analysts that I constantly reference, given Glasner also favours a 3 at the back setup with a sole striker. You can call me deluded, but few gave United any hope of claiming 9 points from Sunderland, Liverpool and Brighton after an awful showing against Brentford, and they went and did just that. It's going to be an obviously difficult task at Selhurst Park, and while I'm not confident, I'm also not certain of disappointment either. I think more than anything, I'm just very curious to see the type of response after the shambles that they delivered at Old Trafford a couple of days ago. So I will put you on the spot. How do you see it playing out? What sort of scoreline are you envisaging?
I think we'll win 2-1.
You reckon 2-1?
Boys, yeah.
Okay, well, I will take that right now, please, with both hands, and I will never look back. That would be fantastic. As always, my man, it is a pleasure to speak with you. What have you got going on with United Arts and otherwise over the next couple of weeks and beyond? And how can people get a look at what you have on offer over there?
I'm pretty much doing the same thing as I always have, trying to stay positive and try to show everybody at least a different perspective that sadly our own legends aren't willing to show, through the platforms that they have. The usual articles and tribute to the legends, which I absolutely love. The history of this club is just something amazing that honestly, the more you read, the more you want to know. That is honestly the number one thing, and that's what got the accounts going. So that's always going to be my priority. But this is it's good. I'm enjoying everything that I do, and I have a good chat with a lot of sensible people who are actually looking for an alternative take, a more positive take from guys like yourself, and a little bit from me too.
And I'm correct in saying it's utdarts.com if anybody wants to see what you have on offer.
Yeah, absolutely. The website is utdarts.com. If you like any of my artwork or any t-shirts and so forth, feel free to visit the page. And my usual handles on Twitter and Facebook at UTDArts1.
Jesus Christ, when I'm giving you an opportunity to plug all your stuff, you go out there and you plug it. Don't be making me pull it out here, Reza. God almighty, things are hard enough. But again...
Apologies, I'm not good at self-promotion.
Yeah, thank you all very much for your support the last couple of weeks. It is a joy to witness the fruits of this Theatre of Red community that we continue to build. I'd ask you all to continue sending your emails and your questions through to editor@theatre-of-red.com. and get in touch across all of our socials. We are on a lot of them. If you fancy, you might like and subscribe wherever you're listening today, because each one of those will help us grow the show further. And be sure to check out Haz and the amazing products that he has on offer for Christmas. All of the info will be available in the bio for the show. So until next week, stay safe, and let's hope for a proper response from Ruben's Reds.